That was amazing.
You like that?
I do.
Yeah. Welcome to the Integrate This EdTech podcast. I'm David Berner, joined by co-host Jeremy Mikla, and we have a special guest with us today, Dr. Katie Novak. Very excited to have Katie with us and talk about a ton of different things. Katie has many books and so many different topics that we can cover. But yeah, what was your favorite part about the intro there? I have to ask.
I mean, the video games really got me, like the leaning into the Pac-Man. Like that was it. That you had me at Pac-Man or whatever arcade game that was.
Yeah.
And just for the record, David, who set the high score that day?
Yeah, I was. So we were at that was at ISTE actually was that the one in Denver, right?
I think that was Denver.
And Jeremy set the high score on that pack.
Oh,
was it Miss Pac-Man?
Yeah.
What an honor. That should be in your bio.
It should be. Yeah. Put it in your LinkedIn bio.
Yes. We've since tried other games and David has come out successful on those.
Okay. No, just hold on to what you're good at,
Yeah, right.
You can curate your own content.
Yep. Well, let's get into it here. And I wanted to ask you, Katie, like you have your consulting and a lot of the books that you've written, everything. I wanted to actually start before that. What was life before the consulting gig and all of that?
Okay, so I have always been a teacher. It's the only job I've ever had. And I started by teaching high school English. And then I went to teach middle school English. And for all of the middle school teachers out there, I see you. We are a motley crew. People say that if you love middle schoolers, like you're stunted in like your own middle school growth, because the things that we find funny and the fact that we think that they're the greatest humans in the world make us really unique. But I was in the classroom for 13 years. And while I was in the classroom, I was trained in universal design for learning as a guinea pig in a study that was funded by the Gates Foundation called The Tale of Four Districts. And they were trying to figure out what it takes to scale really innovative ideas beyond a group of early adopters to the entire school district. And so I was one of the early adopters that was tapped to learn more about this framework. And as a part of that, there were always people in my classroom. It became a lab classroom. So there were people making videos of it and, recording audio. And essentially it was as if I gave informed consent that like, you can have me as an educator. And so as a very early part of that, I was invited to just share a little bit more about what I had learned early about universal design for learning. I'm teaching 7th grade. The first presentation I gave to adults, they said, will you come and present at the Harvard University UDL symposium? And I was like, about what? And they said, oh, just about what you did as a 7th grade teacher before you learned about UDL, because I loved teaching. I thought that I was, great for kids. I was passionate about what I was teaching, and then how it changed through universal design for learning. And so I just essentially went in and did what I would do with 7th graders, which was I tried to get a group of professors and superintendents and scholars to make salsa by giving them only a recipe that was printed in Japanese characters. There weren't enough ingredients. They weren't allowed to work together. And the whole idea was like, see, you can't do it, even though you'd be very capable of doing it if I designed it differently. And so it ends with, there are QR codes and different recipes, and we take out all the ingredients. And at the end of that, someone came up to me and they said, oh my gosh, can I have your business card? I'm like, for what? Like, I teach 7th grade. I don't know what you want my business card for. And they said, like, to come out and our district and just share that, like, it wasn't that you weren't a good teacher. It was just that you didn't have the skill set yet to design for all learners, because I just didn't know how to do that. And so that started it, where my first presentation came out of presenting about what I learned very early in this research study. And it just kind of kept snowballing from that. And so the reason that I started being interested in coaching and administration was simply because I loved working with teachers, and it created a schedule that I had more than 3 personal days a year to support other educators. So it went from classroom to administration to ultimately being able to do this full time.
Yeah. And obviously, like, now you've been in it for a while and you have many books, as we mentioned, but like when was it that you started to get into the consulting, was that from there, did it just kind of snowball, or did it happen a little bit later down the road where you developed Novak Educational Consulting and that?
So that was a little bit further down the road, but like the first time I actually did a paid consulting gig was directly after that Harvard University symposium. So somebody from there said, "Can you come out to our school district in Indiana and do what you did?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I have 3 personal days." And so because the feedback, not only about me, but the other educators in the study was so strong from the field, CAST, and they are the organization that created the UDL framework, they actually created a professional cadre with a number of us who were trained as early adopters, because the field really liked learning from people who were still in the field, in classrooms, in coaching positions. And so for a number of years, I worked with CAST in their professional cadre. So this is like how my career trajectory went in working with adults. It was like presentation 1, Harvard University. Presentation 2, I went out to Indiana and did it on my own. The next 2 presentations through CAST were like Ghent, Belgium, and the Hawaii Department of Education, because CAST has such an incredible reputation worldwide for their advocacy work, for their policy work, for their research work. And they created this cadre of which I was in the most perfect place at the most perfect time to be able to go out and make all these connections. And when they kind of moved away from the cadre model, I was able to continue it on my own. So I would say, I think that Novak Education has been, I think I was doing it before then, but I think technically I like incorporated it as a business in 2017.
So sometimes when we're having these conversations with guests, they'll share a story or an example that to me just like clicks in my brain. And your salsa example that you just gave really did that, and it reminded me of my son loves watching YouTube content creators, and one of the groups that he follows are called the Try Guys. Have you ever heard of the Try Guys?
No, I have not.
They have this segment called Phoning It In. And it's where 2 comedians are in a kitchen and they have to create something, but they don't know what it is. And what they get to do is to talk to 2 chefs that are trying to give them instructions through, talking in their ear like they're talking on a phone. And they have to try to follow the directions that they're giving them to create that. And to me, that does sound like another like fine example of how UDL works. And what you need to, and how you need to plan for those situations so you don't have these comedians going way off the handle creating these things. Then they have to turn it over to judges too at the end, who are telling them whether they did a good job or not a good job. And it's actually really funny. Check that out.
Okay.
Yeah, but which brings me back to UDL here a little bit here. And I think for a lot of people, when they hear the term UDL, it kind of stops them in their tracks, and they have to like, okay, what does this really mean? So if you were to give us the elevator pitch, what UDL is and what it isn't in 30 seconds, what would that be?
Okay, so we can just unpack it. So universal design for learning. Educators are always designing learning experiences for all kids. And what we know is despite our incredible effort and passion, it isn't working for all kids, right? We are working way too hard for kids to not have better results. And so the idea of universal design for learning is, based on what we know about just the diversity of learners and their needs and their challenges and their passions, all of that. How do we design learning so that it works better for everyone? And that's essentially what it boils down to. And so when people say we're doing this already, my response is always, we're not yet. We're not designing learning yet so it works for all learners. There is significant evidence that there are many learners who have significant lagging skills and aren't making a lot of progress, either academically or behaviorally or socially emotionally. And so it's not so much a destination, but ultimately, how are we approaching planning with this lens of how do I focus on firm goals and flexible means so this has a much better chance of working for everyone. And so, if I was going to give an analogy really quickly, is, everybody, if I invited, let's say 25 random people off the street over to my house for a dinner party, and I was like, oh, my goal is I want them to have a really, really great dinner. And then I spent my entire day making my signature lasagna, which has meat and cheese. And then I have this beautiful bottle of red wine, right? That is incredibly high quality. So I don't want to minimize that is high quality. It shows technical precision. It shows passion, right? It's a great meal. I can guarantee you, in just a random inclusive assortment of guests, there's going to be a lot of people who can't eat it because of lactose intolerant, because of gluten sensitivity, because they have a plant-based diet, because they're sober, right? Or just because they're like, I actually hate Italian food. I don't want that. And so what we're doing in classrooms is that educators are looking at these goals, like the job is to make sure that all students understand how complex characters interact in a grade level text. And then they go back to like, oh, I love the book, The Outsiders. So I'm going to hand it out in hard copy. And then they're all going to write a 5-paragraph essay in response to that. And it's going to be done in 2 class periods. So they really are able to do this efficiently. Now, again, it's not that is not high quality. I don't want to like minimize that can be a great experience for some kids, but we know it's not going to work for all kids because we have some kids who are not reading at grade level yet. They don't have the decoding skills. Some students might have some visual challenges. Other students are multilingual. And that's actually not a writing standard. It's a reading comprehension standard. And when we're focused on writing, ultimately we can be flexible about writing by saying, how many different ways are there to brainstorm? Do you want to have a conversation? Do you want to look at exemplars? Do you want to brain dump? How many ways is there to organize your thoughts? Outlines, note cards, graphic organizers. How many ways do we have legitimately to draft writing? It can be writing by hand, it can be typing, it can be voice to text, right? When we're looking at this lens, we're saying firm goals, flexible means. And so if my goal at dinner is I want everyone to have a really good dinner, then I'm going to say, hey, listen, like I was going to put together a lasagna, but I'll also have a salad. Let's potluck this up. And I have water and I have coffee and I have a great bottle of wine, but like BYOB. And the more options there are, the more people can be included. And so in a nutshell, it's how do we design learning that's flexible enough to have a much better chance of meeting the needs of all learners?
Yeah, perfect. And in one of your books, the UDL shift, you talk about 3 tenets of UDL. Yeah. Like quickly, what are those?
Okay, so the 3 beliefs that must be foundational in anybody who's looking to plan for all learners. 1 is recognizing what variability actually is. Now, there's 2 types of variability. Interpersonal variability, we are all different from each other. We're unique. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. Intrapersonal variability is my needs are always changing, which makes it almost impossible to plan for somebody because, I know that I have 4 kids. My son Bowden likes chocolate chip pancakes. My daughter Aylin likes yogurt parfaits, right? Neither of them likes what the other one likes. So in theory, that's the interpersonal variability. But if I just go on and make a yogurt parfait and my daughter's like, oh, I'm not in the mood for that today. And so what teachers are often doing is they're planning for interpersonal variability. Those students may need more challenge. Those students may need more support. And then the students' needs are changing. So I would never be a kid for whom would have been given a lot of extra scaffolding for reading because I was always reading at grade level. I was a very typical average reader. I could read at grade level. So I would not have been given an audio version of a book because teachers would have said, well, she knows how to read. She doesn't need an audio. So we're going to give her the printed text. But if I broke my glasses or didn't put in my contacts, I cannot decode a text. My vision is too poor. And so this concept of like, if something is necessary for someone, we're going to make it available for everyone. That's the idea of variability. The next is firm goals, flexible means. UDL is not lowering expectations. It's not making anything easier. It's really trying to isolate what really is it that all students have to know and do. And if we're going to design with firm goals and flexible means, because of variability, then I need learners to be much better at making responsible decisions for themselves. And so it's also my responsibility to think about, how do I build learner agency? So to go back, one, we recognize that human variability is the rule, not the exception. That what people need depends largely on context, and we will never really know exactly what someone else needs without them helping us figure that out.
Mhm.
And so because of that, we design with firm goals and flexible means as much that is appropriate, right? If the goal is writing, all students are going to produce writing. So there's no option for you can just tell me, but there's lots of ways professional writers produce writing. And then the last is that learner agency piece, which is, how do we help students really think about which of these is going to work best for you today and why, which requires a lot of exploration of trying different things, a lot of feedback from educators and redirection, so that we can get to a place that we can say, okay, this is what the goal is. I want to have instructional clarity here. This is the goal. This is not negotiable. Given that this is the goal, here are a couple of different options for how you can learn, the materials you can use, and how you can share that you've met this exact goal. And so which of these actually works best for you and why? And I'm going to be present as a safety net to help you reflect and redirect, so that ultimately all of you have the best chance of not only working towards that firm goal, but building those transferable skills that all of us are so frustrated that they don't have yet, which is like self-awareness, responsible decision-making, things like that.
Yeah, and Katie, so as you look at the teacher, how do you normally help someone who's say like someone doesn't understand UDL, they're maybe new to teaching, they don't understand how to incorporate those concepts into a lesson. What's your typical approach with them to, like, let's say they're overwhelmed by that, and so they have, they're trying to plan a lesson. What's the easiest in for them to start to incorporate some of those things to allow for that suite of options or that variability to the lesson?
So I play a game often called Explode the Verbs, and I wouldn't necessarily advocate for anyone to universally design a lesson. I would say take a lesson that you have and ask yourself these questions as you think about how you can make it more flexible. And so, for example, yesterday I was working with an educator, and I have my notes right here on a notebook. It's just like, I just don't understand, like, I don't see how you can be flexible all the time. And I said, okay, let's just talk about it, right? There are a number of research-based ways to take notes, right? If you're looking at the research, you have your Cornell note style, you have your dual coding, which is like words and pictures. Sketchnoting is kind of an example of that. And then you have your generative note taking, which is more of like, it makes sense in my brain, it doesn't have to make sense in yours, right? Like, I'm generating them as I go. And so, I said, those technically they all have really strong evidence bases. I said, but I spend a lot of time in classrooms where students are required to, keep a science notebook where they're cutting out things, they're pasting them on certain pages, they have to take notes a certain way, or it has to be Cornell notes. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. And so I think that sometimes, people are feeling defensive because, I'm not saying it can't be an option ever, right? Anything you're doing can be an option, but we just have to realize that that is not a transferable skill, that, you're not going off to college and career with a glue stick and, and scissors trying to make a notebook, right? Like, could it be great for some kids? Absolutely. Like, I don't want to say it isn't, but, if we know as adults, there's multiple ways for us to take notes, and I can walk around in a presentation and see that there are multiple ways that people are taking notes because they care about the content. They want to remember the content. Why are we requiring all kids to take notes in the same way? Right. And the same can be true of annotating text. The same can be true of brainstorming ideas. The same can be true about reflection. So even, I've been lecturing here for about 10 minutes. You've had options for how you're going to take notes, but now I want you to go back and make sense of your notes and summarize your notes. And for some of you, it might be great to actually go in and write a summary. And for some of you, you might want to, if we're really innovative and we're using AI tools, feed all of your raw notes in and try to thematically code them and come up with questions. Some of you might just want to have a conversation and like compare and contrast notes. Let's take 5 minutes, decide how you want to reflect on your notes. Then we'll see if you have any questions, right? And so as you're thinking about like the word reflect, the, note making, discuss, right? All of those, if you can explode them, once you teach the options at the beginning of the year, you can look at almost any lesson and say, oh, in that lesson, they have to access text. Do you want to access it on your own? Do you want to access it with a partner? Do you want to access it hard copy? Do you want to access it digital? Oh, in this part, it says they want to have a discussion. All right, everyone, I taught you how to do a fishbowl. We've talked about think, pair, share. We've talked about having a discussion board discussion, right? Which of those work best for you? When it comes to now we're going to brainstorm before you start your assignment, right? And so I don't think it's the lesson. And I think it's more of what are the pedagogical practices that I use all of the time where I'm teaching students a way as if it is the way. And instead, how do I just step back and say there's other ways to do this? And then people are always a little bit nervous because they say, but what if students are choosing things that don't serve their learning? Then you redirect them immediately. You say, you know what? I've got to give you feedback. I know you're capable of better than this. You seem to be more distracted by drawing than actually taking notes. The sketchnoting isn't working for you. Choose something else. Right. And so I think that sometimes it feels out of control, but it's firm goals always before flexible means. And those flexible means are to increase engagement, increase agency. They're not to increase the fun. They're not so that kids can just be out of control, right? It's all about what in the field of education, like, is actually flexible. So let's take high school science, right? High school science teachers, I'm not saying it's not valuable to learn how to make a lab report. Scientists do not publish their work in a lab report, right? They're either going to do a peer-reviewed research paper, they're going to sit on a panel at a conference, they're going to do a poster session, which is not necessarily with glitter and trifold, but like a really nice digital poster, or they're going to give a presentation, right? And so, they have all their data and their findings, certainly, but like, how do scientists truly share their research? It goes beyond just a lab report. And yet it is the most commonly used way for students to express findings, right? And so like when I say to science teachers is like, yeah, teach them how to do that. Absolutely. And teach it in a flexible way, but then help them to realize that there are actually lots of different ways. Like, there are some scientists who have huge TikTok followings because they're able to take this like really esoteric knowledge and explain it in a way that is more consumable. And so why wouldn't we encourage our kids to do that as well?
Yeah, and that's really great because I think it just helps it to be more approachable. I like what you said about having, you've got lessons, but where are the spots in which you've created a space for only one option, and you how do you expand those options so it's more accessible to students? The next question I have for you is this is to another book, but the Elevating Educational Design with AI, which you co-wrote with Dr. Catlin Tucker, who was just on the podcast with us. What were your conversations like about, so, you both are familiar with UDL. And so what was the conversations like about, there's this new thing, right? The AI, how are we going to look at this with that UDL lens?
So when I talk about AI, like when I present on AI, like my first slide is literally just like a hammer, like legitimately it's a hammer. And I say, okay, let's look at this, right? I'm going to tell you two stories, right? First, I'm going to talk about my dad. My dad is a very, very skilled carpenter, right? Youngest of 7 boys, older brothers are contractors. The man can build anything. With a hammer as a tool, he can create things that otherwise he would not be able to build. And then there's a picture of like my 4-year-old literally just like destroying rocks and things, just going after things with a hammer, right? And that's where I really honestly think of AI in the same way. And it has the potential for incredible creation when used skillfully, thoughtfully, ethically by skilled practitioner. And it also has this potential for incredible destruction, really undoing a lot of what we know about evidence-based practices in pedagogy if we don't stay sharp in our own critical thinking, our own analytic thinking. And so, when we started, I think that we were thinking that, wow, this is a tool that's just going to be able to save teachers so much time because teachers have this skill set already and they can just go in and say, give me a lesson. And ultimately what we realized is that a lot of what it was producing was not evidence-based. It was not leading to the same firm goals. It has a tendency to try to make things easier or more fun. And what we realized was it had never, ever been more important for educators to really think about what does it mean to design a learning experience that truly works for all learners before we start prompting? Because although it is fast, we can never, ever assume that it's accurate or that it's high quality. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't, because it could be, but I really think that we have to lean into more of an AI enhanced process as opposed to an AI replacement of our design work. And so when I'm working with educators, I'll often say, remember how long it used to take to make rubrics, or remember how long it used to take to come up with options for a choice board. And then I will, in real time, I'll say, here's a prompt. Look at this. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm like, stop. You didn't read it. You don't know if it's amazing. You just know it's fast. So first of all, we have to realize that fast isn't amazing, right? And so as we look at it, it's like, okay, so now let's look at this. And there is never a time that I don't have some sort of concern or feedback about how to make it align more to what we know about teaching and learning. And so it's like the prompting and reprompting. And so what I'm scared of in the field of education is that I think it's like, oh, we don't have to invest so much in professional learning and professional development because we have these tools. These tools are not colleagues. These tools actually on the bottom say, hey, we hallucinate and make mistakes. Good luck with me. And so in using it, I think that when we are going to use it as a tool, we have to think about, well, what are we trying to build? Right? Because my dad's not just going to go at a piece of wood with a hammer. He sketches out this birdhouse. He really thinks about, oh gosh, my mother, both of my parents are educators. They're both retired after lifetimes in education. My mom's real into bird watching now. So there's a lot of birdhouses being built, let me tell you. But there's inspiration, right? There's a lot of sketching out. There's making sure that you have those materials first. And then there's thoughtful use of that tool. And so I just want to remind educators that you are always far more brilliant than these tools will ever be. They'll only be as high quality as your inputs, your reflection, and your conversation. And so when we started using it, I think that we were intending to write this book about, look how awesome this is, and then realized, oh my word, this is so inaccurate. And so now the book really needs to be about, let's remember about all we need to do to design really coherent learning experiences. And so neither of us advocate for ever going to AI and saying, create me a lesson. There's 4 different stages. One is just instructional clarity, right? What really is it that all students have to know and do? How will we know if they can do it, right? Really taking the time to be clear on, what is non-negotiable for educators, making sure that we have clarity and learning targets around students, always having that really clear success criteria. And until we have that, it's really difficult to determine now, where can I be flexible? What are the options that students might have for learning? And then the next step after that is, and how do we think about our own role as educators to be able to be responsive to students, to differentiate instruction for students based on the progress or lack of progress they're making, right? So there's a lot of different layers. And I think that some of these companies, have all these tools where it's like, hey, we can make you a choice board, but they don't require instructional clarity first. Or, hey, we can make you a rubric. But to go and create a rubric at the lesson level, you first have to know what the standard is, what the unit goal or the desired results are, what the learning objectives are, and then how you translate those into learning targets. And so I think that it has, in some ways, it's like the canary in the coal mine to say that, this is now an opportunity more than any other time in history to really understand how you design a high quality learning experience so that you can use these tools to do that more efficiently.
And I think one of the best things that you talked about there too, with that is it'll be great if it's a collaborative experience with other educators as you're going through that process. And I want to give a shout out to a group of teachers that David and I were at a conference together on Monday and Tuesday earlier this week. And I went to a breakout session that it was called, let me look at what it was called, How AI Cohorts Elevate Instruction in AI Literacy. And it was by a panel of 3 educators from the same district who had invested in purchasing your book, and they began with a book study, and then within their cohort they used your book as a roadmap to go through some of that process of developing, what is that going to look like within their district. And they gave just a great presentation, and they were extremely complimentary of both you and Catlin through that process as well. So they were Pamela, Amy, and Angie, all from the Elk River School District. And just, nothing but kudos for the work that you're doing there. And it was really great to hear how they were able to implement those strategies across their district and what they plan to, and this was the first year of it. So it was very much now where are they headed next, and really excited for some follow-up there on what they're going to accomplish with a broader audience within their districts here too. So just, I wanted to get that out of the way here first.
I love it. Tell me about the conference so I can try to track these wonderful ladies down and send them a thank you.
Well, sure. You know what? I'll at the end here, I'll message you with their contact information here too.
I would love that.
Probably love that too. But it was a conference for AI in education that was happening regionally in Minnesota and where David and I are. So it was a really nice, well done conference over a couple of days. And
that's wonderful.
Yeah, and David and I are in different parts, so we were actually able to connect and be together in real life, which doesn't always happen. But I love your face, man. I'm just going to say that here too. Well, I got you. So one of the other things here that I know that you present on, you write on quite a bit, and I think there's some connection here to UDL as well as MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support. Can you briefly describe what that is and how the two relate to one another?
Sure. So when I talk about MTSS, this is like my thing. I don't know if the video is ever going to show or if it's just going to be audio, but imagine if you're listening, I put my two fists together, I take MTSS and I snap it in half, because we're so consumed by the MT part that we're missing the bigger picture. Now, the MT part is that all students should be included in Tier 1 classrooms with their peers and have access to grade level instruction that is designed to be flexible enough for students who need more challenge and acceleration and enrichment, and students who have more needs for support, right? And so the Tier 1 foundation of MT is a universally designed classroom, because if we're going to include everybody, it has to be designed so we can include everybody. Knowing that, in addition to that, there are going to be some students who have more significant needs for either enrichment, acceleration, support. And so we have to have a really rich data culture to determine, even when all students are included in Tier 1, what is the additional support that students might need either in small groups or individually. And that could be based on attendance or academics or mental health, whatever it happens to be. So the relationship between the MT and UDL is simply that UDL is that Tier 1 foundation. Now, an analogy that I usually use to talk about MT is just oral healthcare, that like everybody has to go to see the dentist, regardless of how many significant needs you have. Like, you go through the dentist, you're always in the dentist your whole entire life. But the dentist has this lovely data-driven practice where the dentist is using x-rays and things like that. And they're saying, oh my goodness, you're also going to need to see an orthodontist, right? I don't have the qualifications. You're also going to see an orthodontist. Ooh, you're going to need a root canal. You're also going to have to see an endodontist, right? But you're never leaving the dentist's care, right? And so I think in some ways, the way that we've set up MT is that we're not actually supplementing and adding additional support. We're taking away from Tier 1 to provide these additional services. And the reason is because the system, the SS, simply wasn't built for us to do it differently. And so I am much more intrigued by the SS, which is the system of support, which requires districts to really dive in to learn more about implementation science. And implementation science, which transcends education, it's financial and healthcare, right? How do we close this research to implementation gap? If it is, if there's so much research that great inclusive practice design works, why are we not realizing this in our systems? And it's because we don't have the drivers or the ingredients necessary to do it. So the drivers are in three categories, right? You have your competency drivers, which is all about professional learning, right? We haven't taught people how to do it through professional development. We don't support teachers after an initial learning about it through instructional coaching, through really rich feedback, through co-planning, through instructional rounds, through professional learning communities. So the system of support is actually, how do we support educators so that they can support students? So a lot of people, when I come in, they're like, teachers aren't going to want to hear about MTSS. I'm like, they will when they know what it actually is, because it's about, the system wasn't built to give educators what they need to really meet the needs of all kids, right? We are giving people 5-6 preps a day, no high quality instructional materials, very little professional development, not a lot of feedback, right? Many teachers don't have really authentic, great forms of data, right? And they're doing the best they can with what they have. So if we want to change the outcomes for kids, we have to change the system. And so the competency drivers are looking at strategically, how are we going to be providing ongoing professional learning throughout the school year for our teachers? The leadership drivers are staffing, scheduling, family and community engagement. It's all about, a vision for, like, what are we really trying to do here? What's our vision for instruction? Because if we go on the books and we say, our vision is that we start every class with instructional clarity, every kid knows what they're learning and why. And from there, we want all kids to have options for learning, options for the materials they use, opportunities for deeper types of assessments. Or if we're saying that we want to do that, then we have to make sure the teachers know how to do it. We have to make sure that there's accountability in terms of being really transparent about, this is what we're trying to do. But it's also about these implementation drivers, which is like, do we have the technology to do it? Do we have high quality instructional materials? Do we have really good forms of assessment and data across all domains? Because most districts have a ton of data in literacy, math, attendance, but like, we're still very information poor when it comes to the student experience, particularly when you're looking at the holistic experience of kids beyond just math and literacy, which are the ones that are the easiest to measure in standardized testing. So I always think about, how do we build a system that better supports educators so that they can better support kids? And it really starts with this vision of, if we're saying that we're trying to build a multi-tiered system, then we start with tier 1, because we can't intervention our way out. And in order to strengthen tier 1, we have to make sure that our teachers have amazing professional development, strong leadership and clarity about what they need to change, and the resources to be able to do it.
I think you hit on something there too that I just want to bring up. I talk to a lot of teachers, even though I've been out of the classroom here for a few years, but I still have a lot of teacher friends. And, talking to some of them, this summer even, they're already dreading. They know that when they get back to school in the fall, they've got to dedicate workshop time to MTSS training.
Yeah.
And, I can sense they're already dreading this. And
tell them to call me. Tell them to call Katie.
To hear you talk about this, I think just if they would just kind of get to the point where, it's already a lot of what you're doing. It's just, you're now that dentist, and if you need to refer them out to the orthodontist, or if they've got to go see an oral surgeon, you know who those people are in your buildings, and that can help get the support that those students need at those other different tiers and levels. So to hear you explain it that way, to me, lowers, well, it's not going to lower the fear of going to the dentist, perhaps, for some of them, but it still kind of gives them relevance to the training and the importance of meeting the students where they are, and providing the systems in place. But I think one of the other things that I notice here too is, sometimes I feel that our teachers get too bogged down into, and I get it, because there's a lot of time pressures and there's a lot of content pressures that are put upon them, and they're trying to achieve certain test score standards, but they tend to silo themselves, and then they're missing out on some of that sharing of the information and the data that you're talking about, and how they can be used to improve the learning experience for all their students.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is too, is like, data has gotten a really bad name. Like, the reason that we collect data is so we know what's working, so we can keep doing it. And so we know what isn't working, so we can come together and do something different. That's literally the only, like, that is what data culture is, right? And I think that in some ways it has become like this big scary thing. Whereas, like, if we know that these are really good sources of data and we say, wow, that grade, third grade, right, they have so many fewer referrals to tier 2 consistently. What are they doing? Right? Because something is happening there that's like really effective. We want to know what that is so that we can replicate it, right? What are they doing? So like the reason that we're collecting data in all of these spaces is to say something is really going well here. We're seeing more growth than we would expect. And so let's get in there and let's have other people observe it. Let's try to figure out what is happening. And, I think a lot of the times, the I guess the adage, for lack of a better term, I don't even know who to attribute it to, is like we're data rich and information poor. We're collecting so much data, but we don't really know what it's telling us in terms of, a lot of the time we are essentially over identifying kids who need tier 2 and tier 3 support, right? We're saying there's too many kids, but it's because tier 1 isn't meeting their needs and people don't know what else to do. And so that comes down to, okay, so let's see what's happening in classrooms. Are we being really flexible? Are there flexible instructional materials? Do the kids have access to adequate technology? And what I would say across the board is it's probably a lot of not yet. And so that's why we say, if we want to minimize the number of students who are getting referred to these additional supports, we have to think about how we're going to invest in tier 1, which is how do we help teachers to feel more prepared to design instruction that works for all students so that they're making growth. And then we're not saying, gosh, somebody else has got to come in. But I don't want to minimize the fact that sometimes you're going to have a speech and language pathologist come in or a guidance counselor. There's very different areas of expertise. And that's why we have to work together in some comprehensive plan to meet the needs of kids whose needs are more complex.
Yeah. And one of the other things too, as far as students go, and I'm shifting a little bit here, but with another one of your books, the idea of giving students the keys to their learning or helping others learn. So student-led learning. What does that look like in terms of or how is it different, should I say, from like giving kids choice or something like that?
I mean, kids have a lot of choices now that aren't served. Like, it really comes down to, it's not just about choice. Are there construct relevant choices that would be appropriate? So people say to me sometimes, you know what, Katie, sometimes you just can't give choices. Sometimes you just have to pay your taxes. I'm like, great example actually of something that's pretty universally designed, because given the wild variability of Americans, like pretty much everybody, I'm probably going 99% of people, like people get their taxes in. Why? Because there's so many options and there's so much help to do it, right? So it's like, if you want to pay your taxes, right? Do you do them by yourself? You go to the post office, you get the forms, you can do them in hard copy, you can mail them in. You can do them free online. You can get a TurboTax. You can go to H&R Block. You can hire an accountant, right? Can't do them on time, file an extension, want to pay them across the year, pay estimated taxes. Like, there's actually a ton of flexibility, but it's all flexibility that serves this greater goal. And when I am walking in classrooms, I often do see flexible methods, but I don't as often see really firm goals. And so I think that the need here more than anything is instructional clarity. And I got caught in that myself as a teacher. It would be like, now we're doing the Christmas Carol. Now we're on poetry, right? I was an English teacher. Now we're doing public speaking. And that was like the topic, but it wasn't the actual like standard broken down into unit goals. And again, that takes time that you have to invest in to like really unpack that. But it's not just about choices. And also, I think we often give too many choices, because there is some really good research on something called the paradox of choice. And too many choices actually creates really significant barriers to learning. And so people will say, like, how many choices is too many choices? The research is clear that anything over 6 is way too many, but the education research shows the best outcomes for kids are 2 to 4 choices and the barrier is eliminated. So as an educator, I just would always come up with 2 or 3 options. And the 4th option is, if you have another idea that gets you to the same place, by all means, I'm listening. So I know so many educators who are like making choice boards and things like that. Like how it's almost impossible to come up with 9 good construct relevant options. And so, I do think that people are like, I've been doing this because I've been providing choice. But like, if you are sober, I could give you a choice of 3 beers. It doesn't matter. You can't access any of them. So it's really about what is the barrier that I'm eliminating? And then how can I provide construct relevant choices? Because like in my class, speaking and listening standards require an oral presentation. And a student might say, well, I don't want to present in front of the class. Well, this is the construct. And so I can give you options to read from a script or use note cards or present with a partner. You can practice with me during lunch. You can choose what you're going to present about, right? But like this is the construct. And I think some people, because their hearts are so good, they give other options like, well, you can just do it in private. It's like, you have to be able to speak to other people unless there's an IEP modification that says otherwise.
Yeah. And that's really interesting too, because I think, do you feel like there's a misconception about UDL being like something where you're letting the student get out of something that's still important for them to do? Is that pretty common?
Very, very, very common is, when I come in and a lot of the times if I'm giving a presentation in a district that I've never worked before and the leaders say, you know what, I don't think a lot of people are familiar with the UDL framework. My first slide is always, take a minute and either think about what you know about UDL already, what you want to know about UDL, and what concerns you about UDL. And you can do one or more of those. And you can either have a conversation about it with a colleague. You can just write down a list and kind of come back to it throughout the day to see if I've answered your concerns. Or I would love to know about it, because if you have concerns or have questions, I can try to answer them throughout the day. So I open up like a public chat. And this is not for the faint of heart for any of you who present to just see what comes up in a public chat. But like essentially, there is a lot of, the number one I would say is I'm scared it's going to take too much time. That comes up all the time. And, so it really does not. It doesn't take any more time if I was going to say turn and talk to say, would you rather write it down or would you rather have a conversation? It doesn't take any more time if I'm going to hand out a text to say, would you rather read this by yourself silently or would you rather read it with a partner? It doesn't take any more time after I've showed 3 different ways to take notes over the course of a month to then say, now that I've taught you 3 ways to take notes, now you're going to take notes however you want, right? So I think a lot of the times we think it's going to be more time. The other one is exactly that, is I feel like students aren't going to have opportunities they need to be successful. But the big part of learner agency is I need you to try all of them first, because there's no way you'll be able to determine what works best for you until you've tried them all. So you can't say, no, generative note-taking doesn't work for me if you've never been actually taught what generative note-taking is and how to do generative note-taking and feedback on your generative notes. I think the reason that we know ourselves as learners is because we did try these things and we're like, it was disastrous. And that's why I don't do it that way anymore. So there's so much value in this micro failure. The other thing I hear all the time as the number one thing people are scared of is people right now feel so rushed that they said, I don't have time to slow down to let them try these different things. I don't have time to pause every 10 minutes and allow kids to ask questions. And what I would say is, right now you're working really hard, but what I know to be true is that the systems as they exist right this second get the exact results they get. And none of us are really happy with that. And so I know that you're covering a lot, but if the coverage isn't resulting in more learning for all students, it's an opportunity to try some new things. And I'm not saying that you have to do them all at once. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it. But when you're looking that there's so many kids who are over reliant on teachers for information, who are compliant at best, and they're not really engaged, right? In some ways, it's like, gosh, I'm so frustrated they're not engaged, but engagement requires autonomy. It requires being able to make choices. It requires reflection and deciding like, what is the most challenging thing for me right now? So I think that, people are concerned that it's making things too easy. People are concerned that it's going to take too much time for them, but also that it will take too much time in the classroom if we're going to be flexible with kids, because their pacing is going to be off. And what I say is their pacing is off now, right? Even if you hand out a 2-page printed text, somebody's reading it in a minute, someone's reading it in 10 minutes. Like, it's not like every kid is paced the same anyway. So, if you can be a little more flexible about, hey, you're going to have 15 minutes to get through it. If you don't, put a pin in it and come back to it, during an intervention block or something like that. If you finish early, here's a couple of options that you can dive into if you finish early, like revising a previous assignment for full credit, or catching up on, a note catcher for an upcoming exam, things like that. So I just want people to experiment, to try things different. UDL is not a hard sell for educators. Like, when I present all over the world, once people really do understand what it is and how they can implement it, my team and I are looking at probably 97% of people agreeing or strongly agreeing that they learned something really valuable, that they're really on board with it. I think it's just a lot of misinformation and a lot of what I will say is weak AI output, making people think that it's something that it's not. And they look at it and they go, gosh, if this is UDL, then I'm not interested. And I agree with them, but that's not UDL.
Yeah. As you gave some really good examples there of like what this looks like in the context of like a classroom with K through 12 students. But if you're applying this to people like, Jeremy and I are in the PD world as well, and we're often working with adult professional learning. How do you apply these things to that different group, that different context?
It's the same exact thing. So when I present, I'll always hand out a digital back channel that has access to the slides, that has a number of different resources. Ahead of time, I'll remind people that they're welcome to print out any of the resources if they prefer analog ahead of time, to bring their headphones. I always chunk instruction in about 10-minute increments at most. And after the 10 minutes, because what we know is based on like John Sweller's cognitive load theory, what we know about working memory is that people do need time to process. Whether you give it to them or not, they are going to disconnect from what's happening and they're going to process. And so what I'll often do is I'll pause and I'll say, okay, so now I want to give you time to reflect. And for some of you, that means having a conversation. For some of you, that means joining me for a Q&A. For some of you, that means just honestly checking a text real quick or checking an email, because you know that you can't focus with me for the next 10 minutes if you don't get that off the plate. Like, when you're dealing with principals, superintendents, like, they're putting out fires all the time, right? It's like you have a second grade teacher that's like just sitting there worrying about that the kids are eating the sub alive. And so, with the beginning, I say, make a to-do list of all the things that are just on your mind, drop them on a piece of paper. And like, if you need to get back to them, get back to them. But so we'll do about 10 minutes. And then I'll say, like, just take a couple of minutes to reflect, do what you need to do. You can take notes, you can have a discussion, you can do all of these things. And then about every half hour or so, once I'm kind of chunked, I'll say, okay, so you learned all about the different types of scaffolds, right? And so now you're going to be able to learn more about scaffolds. Would you rather learn about them by staying with me and I'll share how I incorporate them in a lesson? Or would you rather watch a couple of videos, go somewhere, go outside? Or I literally started my own mini podcast. It's called The Education Table. Every episode is less than 10 minutes. And I did it for the sole purpose of my presentations, that I can then say, or you can go for a walk or go get a coffee. And people will say, I'm allowed to leave. I'm like, you're a highly trained professional. Yes, you can leave. There's a Starbucks 4 minutes away. Put in your order now. You can put it on. And like afterwards, people can sit or stand, they can talk or they can. And what I'll often say too, is I'll say, like, if you're an extrovert, if you're an introvert and you want to work on your notes right now, raise your hand. And I'm like, extroverts, leave them alone. Leave them alone. They need to do their work. But I think that we can do the same exact things, which is like, do you want to read something? Do you want to watch something? Do you want to stay for a Q&A, or do you want to go back and apply it? All of that is going to be really important.
So Katie, kind of as we are winding down here a little bit, getting near the end of the hour, David had mentioned early on that, you're the author of 17 books.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, and I'm going to guess probably not done.
Well, who knows?
Who knows? But one of the things that I'm kind of curious about here is when you think about the whole process from the beginning of writing through the actual publication of the book, what most excites you about a new project, and what most dreads you, or what do you most dread about that?
I don't dread anything about a new project. I think that like I'm actually always very excited about a new project. It doesn't strike me as like, oh no. So like I'm a long distance runner. Like I've run a 50-mile race. So like I don't look at things ahead and go, oh my gosh, this is going to be so much to get through. It's more of like, oh, I wonder if I can pull this off too. Like, can my body hold up this long? So I love a new project. For me, the difference is like, do I feel like there's enough that I've learned since the last project that there's something valuable to share? So right now people are like, is there another project in the works? And it's like, well, I'm building a graduate course based on the new book, UDL Shift, which I'm super excited about. But, it's not about like, well, what's the next book? It's like, if I have this really good idea and it's not something that's in the field, then I'll start saying, okay, like maybe there's a gap here that I can fill. But I love writing. I really do. I write every day, no matter what, even if it's just like a blog for my site or some content. As much as I love AI, I never, ever use AI to draft. My process has changed very little since the advent of AI, which is that I do all of my drafting voice to text. So I can talk so much faster than I can type. And so what I'll often do when I have an idea is I take out my phone, I'll put on my audio recording, and I will literally I have to close my eyes to get my best ideas, and I will just go, right? I will share all my ideas. And so people are like, how can you put these out so fast? I was like, because I talk fast. So I'll put all of my ideas out. I have an audio file. I take the audio file transcript. Now what I'll do is I'll feed it to ChatGPT and say, do not change one single word of mine, but please put this in a copy edited version, because it's one run-on sentence otherwise, right? And then I'll take that and then I'll put it back into Google Docs. And that's when I really start to dig into it. Once I'm done, I then start feeding it to AI as devil's advocate. So I'll say, listen, I'm working in a district that has this policy. Could there be anything here that people would push back on? Or would this be equally resonate with a teacher who's in preschool or a teacher who teaches AP science? Would the IB school community be able to connect with this? And then it will just give me prompts. And I honestly think it's so good at that piece. And then I'll go back in and I'll kind of write it on my own. And I do have Grammarly in full transparency to all of those people out there. But so this idea of I can write more efficiently now because of these tools, but the tools don't do any writing for me. And so how do we then say as educators, we don't have to change the whole process, but a part of the process can be made a lot more efficient, if we still kind of ground it in our voice.
That's interesting. Matt Miller kind of made a similar comment about that when we had him on a while back. Is he'll have his phone with him when he's out on an easy run or a walk, and that is when he's speaking into his phone. And
he does it too.
Yeah, and then he said almost exact same thing. Don't change, the words, the meanings, the intent behind anything. I'm not even asking for a summary. Just turn it into something I can then edit. And then he puts it, goes towards a book or goes towards a blog post or a newsletter or an email, whatever it happened to be while he was doing it. So it was really interesting to hear you brothers sticking together on something like that. One other question though here that I have is you've got these 17 books. Is it and you mentioned you have 4 kids. Can you pick a favorite, or is it like picking a favorite of your own children?
I mean, I have to say my favorite is the newest one, just because I think I am a learner. I am a voracious learner. I'm a reader. I always am so excited when people ask for peer reviews of books and articles, because I want to know what's out there. And so I just think that it just represents my most recent thinking, which I'm most excited about right now. So when I, wrote, let's say UDL Now, which is probably the most widely read UDL book, it had 3 versions that I wrote. When I wrote the last version, there wasn't AI. Like it did not exist, in the way it exists. School districts were not investing as heavily in high quality instructional programs to try to ensure access to grade level instruction. Like there just wasn't that lens where every strategic plan in the universe is, let's get some ELA curriculum, let's get some math curriculum, right? And how does that coexist with universal design for learning, right? Because it can, but I think that people tend to see it as like friction, like this thing is scripted, this thing is all about choice, they can't work together. So there's a whole section on that. There's a whole section on how we can prepare students for standardized tests in really flexible, engaging ways, because unfortunately we have not been able to take down the standardized testing industry in its current form. And so it is something that we have to work towards, but we don't want to teach in an inaccessible way to prepare students for an inaccessible test. And so, really leveraging the research on interleaving these standardized tasks throughout, as opposed to just waiting until test prep. So I'm very, very excited about it. UDL Shift, it just came out in April, and the next one, I'm sure, will replace it as my favorite. That being said, I want to put it on the record. My fourth child, which is my most recent, is not my favorite, because I feel like this is going to get out there, and then Bowden's going to be like, yeah, knew it, most recent. All four tied.
All right. Well, Katie, we're going to be at our what many would probably describe as our toughest part of the podcast, which is the lightning rounds and the this or that, where you have to make some hard choices here. So I'm going to kick things off. Jeremy and I will go back and forth, but you mentioned that you read a lot, but what's a book or show you like right now that isn't education related?
So I am really into the true crime genre. And I think, like everyone in America right now, I just watched The Crash on Netflix.
Okay.
Is this lightning round? Like, I'm trying to answer them lightning quick.
Yeah. That's so you've had an opportunity to be a co-author with several, on several different projects and stuff. What's the best experience that you've had with co-authoring?
Hands down, my dad. I wrote UDL and the Clown with my dad. We have a super, super close relationship. He's been an educator my whole entire life. He inspired me to do it. And it was so cool getting to write a book with my father. Now, I love all my co-authors, but like being able to do something like that with a daddy is amazing.
Best place you've eaten or meal that you've had?
Gosh, best place I have eaten. I'm going to go with my mama's Hungarian goulash. She still makes it every year on my birthday, and I'm going to be 47. So that's my favorite food in the world.
What's a place besides home, can't choose that you always enjoy going back to?
First Encounter Beach on Cape Cod. It's where my in-laws live, and at low tide you can walk out miles, and there's sand dollars, and then you place a tube in when high tide comes in, and you can float all the way back.
Nice.
That sounds like fun. We have a river near our house, and we just sometimes we'll just drop the tube in the summer and just float on down.
Last one of the lightning round. Jeremy and I are doing a conference tomorrow. You're our keynote speaker. What's your walk-up song?
Thunder, AC/DC.
All right. Nice.
So we'll do a couple of others here you have to choose one or the other. We're going to really nail you down, put you on the spot. Okay. And then we'll just kind of do these rapid fire. Would you rather run at 5 a.m. in the dark, or would you rather present a keynote with 20,000 people staring at you?
I love both of them, but I've never done a keynote that big. So I would rather have a keynote with 20,000.
What do you prefer doing? Writing the first chapter of a new book or the last chapter?
First chapter.
Do you prefer the mountains or the beach?
The beach.
For enjoyment now, do you prefer listening to podcasts or music?
Music.
Would you rather get a text or a call?
Text. I don't answer my phone ever.
You're at a party. Are you the first to leave or the last one out the door?
I'm gonna go. I have to edit this one. I'm gonna be the most fun person and then leave early because I fly too close to the sun. I'm like Icarus. So you'll remember. Like I'm gonna bring the most energy, but no, I'm not gonna make it. I love like a 10 p.m. bedtime.
and for people maybe my age or so that grew up, that loved watching Seinfeld on in the day, and George just like, that's it, I'm out. And, it's just like after he hit the highest moment and leave on that point.
Oh no, again, yeah. Everyone always, my friends are like, you just fly too close to the sun. Like I can't hold it for that long.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think about education? Is it a sprint? Is it a marathon? Or I'll give you an out here, or is it something different?
Oh gosh, I think it's probably one of those like crazy Spartan races, like where you're like literally like you're crawling underneath the barbed wire and you're like getting on each other's shoulders to try to get through the mud, because it is a team event. Like the education is not something you can do on your own. And definitely you can run a marathon, you can run a sprint on your own. Like we are dragging each other through the muck for the victory at the end, which is like, we are going to figure this out. Again, you're saying your friends are teachers. All my friends are teachers, right? It is the greatest group of people in the world. It is the most beautifully rewarding / heartbreaking work in the world. And I don't think any of us would do it if we didn't think it was worthwhile. And that's like the crazies that do the Spartans, right? Everyone's like, why would you do that to your body? And you're like, because at the end, you're like, I did it. So that is my answer.
All right. Well, Katie, we want to give you a chance. Is there anything that you have that you want to communicate out that's like upcoming, or socials, any of those type of things that you want to let listeners know that you have coming out?
So I would just say I'm very easy to find online, Novak Education, Novak education.com. And again, check out UDL Shift. It was published by a dear friend of mine, George Kuros. And it is literally, it came out last month. So it is current. Hopefully it speaks to you in really practical ways. I want to address the concerns that this is going to be way more work, that it's trying to make things easier, or that there's no possible way you can incorporate it. Because I really believe that anybody can take the next step forward in being more flexible to increase learning outcomes for your learners.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to include the links in the show notes and everything. So if you want to check out Katie's books or anything with the consulting, you can do that. So Katie, thanks for the great conversation and all the things that you talked with us about. We appreciate it. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for inviting me. It was so fun.